Thank you very much. Mike, that was moving, touching, and I now know I have a hype man. So thank you very much. And I will tell you, one of the greatest joys, and I think I speak probably for many, when you have an opportunity to watch somebody grow in this organization, to watch you come in and really work hard to reach the level of governor has been absolutely tremendous. And thank you for your service to the organization, to our district. And just like you said, thank you most of all for our friendship. Really, really appreciate it. So, I can't tell you how humbled and honored and privileged I am to stand before you tonight. Because back in 2011, I attended my first Zone Institute in Boston, Massachusetts. The director at the time was Kenneth Graybow. And it was a memorable institute in that, for those who were there might remember, we literally started with an earthquake and we got asked to leave because there was a hurricane on the way, and that was Hurricane Irene. And yeah, we're here, and I remember because it was one of those things that was just absolutely incredible to be part of and to have that opportunity. And that was my first opportunity to see Rotary on a completely different level. And because of that opportunity and my subsequent work in the zones, I've done things that otherwise I wouldn't have otherwise done. I've gone places I otherwise would have never been. I have met people that I otherwise would have never met. But most importantly, I was inspired by those people and what Rotary can do that otherwise I would have never known if it wasn't for the resource we have in our zones. And my hope is there are first-timers in the room tonight that let this be your first opportunity to see Rotary on a different level and see how wide this net casts, because it's absolutely incredible how it can inspire you, it can change your life, as it's done for me. I have a goal for this organization that I hope I share with all of you, and that my goal is that this organization is here for my children and for my grandchildren and way beyond. And I can spend the next 20 minutes talking about why that might not be, based on where we're at. And the current situation we have in North America is different than it is around the world. Because if you were to go back in North America 20, 30, 40 years, this concept didn't exist. Because Rotary was in its rightful place. People knew it, things were great. And if you fast forward, that's not what today is. And there are places in the world that we can look at that Rotary still holds that place. But we're at a pivotal time in the history of our organization to do something to make sure that it's still there for our children and our grandchildren. I have a goal that our organization is there in the future. And this year, we are led by, hands down, an amazing, inspirational leader, our very own Jennifer Jones. And Jennifer has inspired us to imagine what we can do in Rotary. And everybody can imagine differently, and imagine means something different to everybody. But for me, I imagine in a way that there's a time in which in North America we will not have to explain what Rotary is. To imagine a time where our brand is recognized everywhere we go. To imagine a time where our clubs represent the communities in which they serve. These are the things that I imagine. We've all heard the cliche to think outside the box, right? And we're at a point in our organization that we have to look at it where there's literally no box. Because we have to reimagine what this organization can be and what this organization needs to be to make sure it thrives in our great future. Because at the end of the day, we have to find ways to be relevant to all demographics to ensure that we hold a place in society that we once did 30, 40, 50 years ago. We have to create something from scratch, built off the traditions and the history of our organization. In the path to becoming director, I've had some really tremendous opportunities. Obviously, over the past couple of years, it's been different than it has been in our history with obviously COVID. But COVID for me personally did provide silver linings in that I've had an opportunity to be part of the board much earlier than I ever would have if COVID wasn't there. And the advent of Zoom and online meetings, that I've been going and being part of the board as an observer since the January after I was put forward to serve in this role. Where traditionally it's only a couple board meetings that you have the opportunity to be part. I've had now 6 board meetings to see what goes on. And this past April, at the board meeting, our very own past Rotary International Vice President and current trustee, Dean Rohrs, made an impassioned plea to the directors on the concept of regionalization. At that meeting, she shared with the group that one size does not fit all. And for us to be able to thrive in the future for Rotary, Rotary might and could and should be different all throughout the world. And she empowered the directors that were around that table to go back to their zones, to go back to the Rotarians, and ask them, how can Rotary be so that we're vibrant and we're thriving? And as we saw earlier today, anytime Dean speaks, it's impassioned. And I will tell you, she moved the room because everybody was ready to run through the wall and go back to see how they could bring Rotary forward in a new and imaginative way. And Dean, thank you so much for that. And the realization that one size does not fit all is a really key message on every level of organization, that it's not going to be the same for everybody. And in a situation where somebody, whether it's a Rotarian, a club, a district, is receiving the experience that they're looking for, that's wonderful. But in the situation that they're not, we have to find ways to be inclusive and accessible to all. We need to focus on being bridge builders because we have such a storied, historic past. We need to work on doing and moving forward all the great work that was built and be on the shoulders of all those who've come before us. We have 117 years of tradition and legacy that's unparalleled. And to go back and say, if somebody's receiving the experience they're looking for, all is good. But I speak for those who might not be receiving that experience and the things we have to consider to do to make sure that they do going forward. We have the opportunity to fall within the constructs and confines of our manual procedures, our bylaws, without having to go to the Council on Legislation to reimagine this organization and do things differently to see what works and, quite frankly, what doesn't work. Because I'll be the first to say not every idea is going to work. But unless we try that idea, unless we try new concepts, we're just never going to know. But it all starts with a conversation, and if we do find things that work and we find things that are well, we have the ability to change our organization through the Council on Legislation. We have to imagine. Let's imagine a world where things change, where district conferences, which right now I'm sure there's many districts that might have 100 people that go to district conference. There was a time when every district conference had 400, 500. And I think we could all agree, and if you look at this room, when you're in a room of 300 plus people, it's palpable. It's an amazing feeling. We go to international convention because we're in a city with 20,000 of us. It's incredible. But unfortunately, we put on events that have 60 people, 80 people, 100 people. What can we be doing? What can we imagine that changes this? I'm a very, very firm believer in regionalization. And when I say that, it's bringing districts together to do events that they're doing currently on their own. You have an economy of scale. We see it. We have great fortune that in certain areas of our 2 zones, we have multi-district pets. And for those who participate in multi-district pets, for those who have attended multi-district pets, I would assume you would all agree that those events are special. When our president-elects go to multi-district pets, they come back energized. They're charged. They're excited to go back to their clubs to share the story of what just happened. And I bring it back to when you bring 300 people in a room that all have the same ideals, they're having fun. And you just can't replicate that when it's 60 or 80 or 100 people. And there's nothing wrong with an event that's 60, 80, or 100 people. But what you can do with more hands is absolutely amazing. I implore all of our districts to find ways to work together. So if you're not currently doing pets together, and I understand there's geography issues, but find a way to make it worthwhile to come together for your pets. Consider conferences, right? If we're doing it, it's 80 or 100 people or 120 people, and you have a district of 2,000, there's a missing piece there. But if we're able to put groupings together, you could have events that are 300, 400, 500, which will move that needle and provide that same thing our multi-district pets are doing. Let's imagine events that are 300 people and 500 people. Let's imagine a situation where a district governor does not have 157 different things that our manual of procedure prescribes our district governors to have. Right? So nobody ever wants to hear a past district governor say, when I was governor. But when I was governor, everything fell on these shoulders. And I'm sure there's plenty of people in the room that happened to, right? And if we're going to be successful in moving this organization forward from a governance perspective, we have to find ways of doing things as a group. To not have an autonomous position where it's every year we reinvent this wheel. That we have consistency, we have collaboration, right? To do things as a group, and there are districts that are out there that are extremely successful that run as a board. And if you look at the not-for-profits in our backyard, right? Whether it's Canada, it's the US, most not-for-profits don't run with one individual who does everything. They have a chair of their board, and there's a group of individuals who make all the decisions, who think out 3 and 5 years down the road and have a strategic plan. It's not every year something new. And I would believe that the districts that are bringing those concepts in now are the districts that are starting or are currently thriving. And if you have a district where everything falls on one person, I ask you to look at the model of spreading it out. Because if we're looking for different and new leadership, that could be those who are currently working, it could be those who are retired, we have to find ways to make the job manageable, to not have everything fall on one person. We have the ability and the imagination to change this today. We do not need a COL enactment to run our organization with multiple people doing the job of what's prescribed for one. You have that ability right now to do that. I implore you to imagine to find a way to do it. I want to share a story with you of 3 organizations that have recently, in my mind, changed the paradigm of Rotary in a region that we call Central New York. So can I ask everybody here from District, I don't want to mess this up, 7150, 7170, and 7190. Can I ask you all to rise for a second? Because I want this group to be recognized before I share this incredible story of what's happening literally right now. We have 3 districts in Central New York that realized that how things are currently being done need to shift. These 3 districts have now come together, checked all egos at the door, and they're not merging. It's not one district acquiring the other. These 3 organizations are literally creating something brand new. It doesn't exist. They're no longer a district. Now, Rotary International can call them anything Rotary needs to or wants to, right? Again, we have a constitution, but they're being recognized as a region, Central New York Rotary. They're identifying themselves as a geography as opposed to a number. Right. Think about this. If I ask somebody, where are you from, is the first thing you're going to say to me, I'm from District 1, 2, 3, 4? You have identity that ties to a geography. If we go out to the public and we talk about who we are, when we use a number, we fall on deaf ears. But if I say I'm from Rotary, New York, I instantly identify with people. And this group is leading the charge in being CNY Rotary, and I couldn't be more proud of them for all that they're doing. And I had the fortune and pleasure of being with them on their retreat where their leaders came together to talk about what this is going to look like. And everything from branding to naming of roles was discussed. And to be more relevant, the concept of what we call a district governor, and Rotary International can still call a district governor, they're calling a regional president, right? Something that we're all familiar with outside of Rotary. We all know assistant governors, yes? This group is creating a position called area representatives. But you want to hear a really, really cool concept? Rather than the district, or in this case the region, deciding who these area representatives are going to be, it's from the ground up. The clubs are going to elect who the area representatives are going to be. Different concept, right? Something that I'm assuming is not done in our districts. But something that could wind up going to the Council on Legislation down the road, in that it's how we're now going to do things in the future. The point is they're coming at it from completely a blank slate. There's nothing that exists now because ego is not getting in the way. They're trying to create an organization that not only will be relevant to their current members, which is going to be a total of about 3,000 Rotarians, but it's going to be relevant to all the communities they serve. And really that, to me, is what the goal and what it's all about. If we all can identify, and if everyone can notice, we have our great blue badges as our name tags. You notice something missing? We didn't do district numbers. Because the conversation starter to me is where you're from. And you're able to talk about your geography and where you are, and you can be more relatable, because I am candidly telling you, I don't know all the numbers. I can never get it straight in my head what district this is. But if you tell me where you are, I know exactly where that is. And my hope is we all can identify as we go forward as Rotary wherever we're from, because I think that could groundswell and get people excited. I ask that you imagine what we can do with our current structure. Whether it's branding, whether it's awareness, whether it's what we identify as our verbiage, whether it's how our districts are governed or structured. I tell you, you have a blank slate to try new things. But the biggest takeaway, if there's a takeaway, is to work together. That it shouldn't be independent working. It should be a group coming together to create amazing things, because when more hands do come together, it's absolutely tremendous what we can do. I would be remiss if I didn't take a moment or two to talk about family and Rotary, because I will tell you that's the nearest and dearest to my heart. As Mike mentioned, as many of you have seen me on stage or heard me in a little tiny box on Zoom, this is a big deal. And for me personally, it's a path that I've walked literally for 20 years now, that as we're reimagining, as we're imagining Rotary and what it could look like, I beg of you to make it as accessible as you possibly can for those who are in a situation where they're caring for children, whether it's kids or grandkids or nieces or nephews or whatever. And I'll be the first one to say, and I always say, not every Rotary event is kid-friendly or for a child. Our little boys are not here this week because it didn't make sense for them to be here. But there are plenty of things we do where we can engage our partners and our kids and our children. So as these leaders in front of me plan conferences and multi-district pets and multi-district assemblies now, that you consider bringing children in and bringing partners in. Because I will always say, if you make a Rotarian choose between Rotary and family, rightfully so, Rotary should lose every single time. But if we can find ways to be inclusive and we don't make people choose, we have a greater chance for nothing other than creating the next generation of this great organization. So I am challenging you to imagine Rotary. For the leaders that are coming up, the N's, the E's, I'm openly going to tell you the easiest path in Rotary is to do nothing different. If you were to do the same thing year over year and not rock the boat or ruffle the feathers and just do what was done, you'll have a good year. There's no argument. You'll be patted on the back, you'll be applauded. But I'm challenging you to rethink it, to reorganize it, to reimagine it. Because if we can do that, if we could be dreamers, we have the opportunity to ensure that my goal is met, and I hope all of your goals are met, in that we're here for generations to come. So please join me in being a dreamer, because this organization was literally built by dreamers who had an idea, who had ideals, and all these years later, we all come together under that premise because they once had a dream. And I ask all of you to find a way to make sure that we're here for another 117 years. I thank you for all that you have done in Rotary, all that you do in Rotary, and most importantly, all that you're going to do in Rotary. Thank you.